Why do you think over the past 50, 60, 70 years, sleep has continued to decline in terms of the quality?
This is really sad. But I would say that in our society, in this country right now, I would say 80 to 90% is spent more on the side of fight or flight. When you take a sleeping pill, it's not affecting this area of the nervous system that regulates sleep. It's a sedative that basically is putting your cerebral cortex into a sedated state. It's not even producing normal sleep.
Sleep is so crucial for healing, for cellular regeneration. If you want to reverse a condition, if you want to reverse hypothyroidism, if you want to reverse autoimmune disease, if you want to reverse type 2 diabetes, deep sleep is where it happens. And I do want to mention, I'm a big fan of nutrition, but turmeric does not heal you. Broccoli does not heal you, okay? Vitamin C doesn't heal you. The body heals itself. If you've been doing everything right, eating clean, exercising, but somehow you're still not feeling your best, your energy's dragging, your memory is slipping, and it's frustrating because you know there's more to your potential. Well, what if the issue isn't just in your routine, but it's deep down inside your cells? You're investing in the best supplements, working out regularly, and sticking to a clean diet. But if your cells are stuck in what's called cell danger response, all the hard work might not be paying off as it should. Think of your cells like a house under renovation. You can bring in the highest quality materials like the best supplements and clean foods, but if the workers inside the house are on lockdown because of a storm, nothing gets done. The materials just pile up unused. That's what happens when your cells are in CDR. They can't fully use the good stuff you're giving them. Getting out of CDR, the cell danger response, is the key to unlocking your body's full potential. When your cells are no longer in protective mode, they can finally use the nutrients, hormones, and energy you're working so hard to provide. That's when everything starts to click. Your energy improves, your workouts become more efficient, and you start to feel like yourself again. Go to beyondbloodwork.com to learn how to break free from cell danger response and make the effort pay off. Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Josh Axe Show. I am your host, Dr. Axe, and each and every week on the show, we dive deep into the science and principles behind how to grow in body, mind, and spirit and take your health and your life to the next level. On today's episode, I'll be talking to Dr. Dan Cohen. And Dr. Dan is a neurologist and CEO of Soltec Health. And he spent his entire life researching how to help people get better quality sleep. And on today's episode, we'll talk about the relationship between sleep and stress. We'll talk about some of the top ways you can get better sleep and the importance of sleep. And let me just start off by saying, there are so many people, when you look at the statistics, that are not getting enough quality sleep. And by the way, not getting enough quality sleep increases your risk of almost every condition you can imagine. Everything from hypothyroidism, low testosterone, ADHD in kids, having issues regarding chronic infections and weak immunity. And we're going to be going through exactly how to take your sleep to the next level using some ancient practices that have now been modernized to help us get better quality sleep. Dr. Dan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Josh.
All right. So Dan, as we were talking about, so many Americans sleep poorly, and it gets worse as we age. What are some of the big reasons why you think people are starting to sleep so poorly and why it gets worse as we age?
Well, there's really a couple big reasons, and one of them, up until now, has not been preventable, and that's the loss of deep sleep. That occurs naturally, which is unfortunate because deep sleep is the most important stage of sleep. And it's responsible for all sorts of positive benefits in terms of cell repair and regeneration and regulation of the immune system, the endocrine system. So that it's vital. But, we start losing deep sleep as we leave childhood, and by the time you hit your late adolescent years, it sort of stabilizes for a bit. But even by your mid to late 20s, you just go on this decline, and you pretty much have lost it all by your 70s.
Yeah, I think I never had an issue sleeping until I got to be, I remember it was about my mid 30s, and it started getting a little bit worse. And part of it was after a back injury I had. And then I think I felt like my nervous system got into this sympathetic state, and it took, sometimes it was different. Sometimes it took longer for me to fall asleep. Sometimes I wouldn't be able to stay asleep through the night. And sometimes I'd wake up really early. And I remember this about my dad. My dad could always fall asleep. He could always stay asleep, but come like 4 a.m., he was just up the rest of the morning. That's still true, it took for years. And so most people have different sleep issues. And I'm sure everyone listening here, they're saying to themselves, well, I'm that person that can't fall asleep, or I'm that person that wakes up earlier. I'm just a light sleeper. But the good news is there are things we can do. And I think part of this has to do is, as we talked about, there are emotional issues. If you have relationship issues, if you have emotional stress, that affects our sleep more than anything. So we know we should go to the root and do some time, in prayer, more time in meditation, more time reading the Bible, more time growing spiritually. And these things are absolutely things that we should be able to do to help. But in addition to that, one other problem I believe we have is we're sleeping indoors. We're not connected to the ground. And there's something that the earth emits that we don't get if we're in a home, especially sleeping on a second floor, as a lot of people do, or up on a bed. Talk to me about what that thing is that we're missing by not being actually grounded or actually having our bodies touch the earth when we sleep.
You're one of the few people who recognize this. I got to tell you, the people in sleep medicine would look at you right now and say, "What are you talking about?" So congratulations. But that concept of grounding is really key. Let's face it. Humanity evolved through the animal kingdom over, essentially hundreds of millions of years. And our nervous system literally evolved in the presence of the earth and its magnetic field. And as you get further and further isolated from that, then you end up losing the effect of some of the frequencies that the earth naturally emits. And that's a big part of the problem, because the earth emits these frequencies that resonate with the primitive part of the brain that was present back with reptiles and amphibians. And so all that evolution has happened, and now we're disconnected. Meanwhile, reptiles and amphibians aren't. So I think they're probably sleeping just fine, but humans, not so well.
Well, I think I will say, I think, whether somebody has an evolutionary belief system, or a creationist belief system, I do think either way, and even if you look at the world religions, the three major world religions, all of them will state in their Bibles, and the ones I'm most familiar with is Christianity and Judaism. But they say in Genesis, we are made from the dust of the earth. We are made from mud. We are clay, and God formed us from that, essentially. And so from that, we are meant to live in tune with nature. And with not, it's going to affect our circadian rhythms. I'm actually working on a book right now on longevity. And one of the things that I started doing in this book is getting into the sort of Western ideas of longevity, and then the ancient Eastern ideas. And in ancient Eastern idea, there's a term that they'll use. It's called Shen in Chinese medicine. It's one of the three treasures that support longevity. And it's really tied to your other circadian rhythms. So living in tune for when the sun goes up and the sun goes down, and being outside. And one of the things I've noticed, and I've prescribed to a lot of my patients, is spending more time outdoors. And the single biggest lifestyle factor I've noticed that impacts my sleep more than anything is the amount of time I spend outside versus the amount of time I spend inside. Is the single biggest factor I've noticed that affects my sleep. And I think a big reason for that is, as we've talked about, is there are frequencies. When you're out in nature, you're hearing crickets. You're hearing birds. There's actually sound waves being emitted from the earth. There's magnetic forces that are coming out of the earth. There's science around grounding and earthing. And one of the things that I know you've studied as a researcher and you've actually innovated is technology to help give off those similar low magnetic frequencies as the earth gives. And you've seen some incredible results in helping people get better sleep through some of the technology you've created. Walk us through how you discovered this technology and some of the science behind it.
Well, actually, the discovery was sort of happenstance. I mean, and it was really strange. We had been working on stress mainly. And we had developed this vibroacoustic technology. And one day a friend called and said, hey, look, I've got a problem I haven't told you about. And he had cancer, he had renal cell carcinoma. And he was in a drug study. And he developed a peripheral neuropathy associated with the chemotherapy. And he was going to be dismissed from the drug study because the side effects were so severe. And so he wanted to know if our technology could help him. And I said, well, I know it can't hurt. So, come to my office Monday, Wednesday, or Friday at noon, and I'll just, hook you up and, we'll run you for an hour session and we'll see what happens. Over the course of a month, his symptoms, his peripheral neuropathy symptoms were reduced by 85%, according to his report. And so he was able to stay on the drug study. And there were remarkably positive effects that I don't want to disclose because they seem a little too outlandish. But the bottom line was it caused the engineers and I to sit on the floor and take apart our equipment. And we realized that we were inadvertently producing an extremely low frequency, magnetic frequencies, or a magnetic field that had extremely low frequencies in it that were well below the brainwave frequencies. And so then we started to do our experiments on that. And that's what led us to the discovery.
Wow. Yeah, and these are very connected as we're talking about these low magnetic frequencies and these vibrations that people are feeling. I mean, there's no doubt that there's great science behind it. I was actually looking up research before our interview here on how magnets and these magnetic frequencies affect sleep. There's one study that found that people who use these types of technologies that you've helped innovate have a 15% increase in deep sleep. And I want you to talk about deep sleep and the difference between, your sort of regular sleep, REM sleep, and deep sleep, and what each is good for and why particularly deep sleep is important.
Yeah. Let's first start out and look at sleep in a broader context. Okay. There's really two ways to sort of slice it. And that is REM sleep, which is, REM stands for rapid eye movements, which occur during dream sleep. And then there's the whole non-REM category. And when you break up sleep time, 75% is non-REM, and non-REM is typically light sleep and deep sleep. Okay. And the reason they call it deep sleep, or also called slow wave sleep, is that the brain exhibits brain waves that are considered very low, but not nearly as low as the frequency that affects the pacemaker of sleep. Okay, so these delta waves or deep sleep waves, in a normal person, deep sleep is about 25% of the night. The light sleep is about 50%, and then dream sleep 25%. So 75% is this non-REM sleep, and I hate the fact that somebody arbitrarily just divided it and said, okay, this is a threshold between deep sleep and light sleep, because it's an arbitrary definition. And so nobody ever took the time of saying, wait a minute, let's measure the total depth of this entire non-REM sleep, since we spend 75% of our sleep in it. Okay. And back in the mid 80s, we pioneered the field of automated sleep diagnostics. So, that's when I started working in this field in 1985. And my argument with the Sleep Society was, hey, you know what? We really need to look at this whole spectrum and grade the entire depth of non-REM sleep. But they were so set in their ways of this. Well, if you have 6 seconds of delta waves in a 30-second period, that's deep sleep. But if you have 5.9 seconds, it's light sleep. And therefore, they allowed light sleep to be everything from almost deep sleep to drowsiness. And so if I told you, Josh, you had 50% of your sleep time was spent in light sleep, the question you should ask is, well, how deep was my light sleep? Which sounds kind of silly.
Yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense. So, again, as people tend to define it, there are these two buckets between light and deep, but the reality is the whole spectrum here, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
And
that makes
so,
sense.
but to get to your back to your question, is deep sleep is very, very important, and it's everybody agrees it's the most important stage of sleep, because with sleep deprivation studies, the stage of sleep that returns right away the fastest is deep sleep, because that's what is required for cellular healing. Cell repair, cell regeneration, stem cell health, all of that is deep sleep, as well as, again, regulation of the immune system to keep, allow you to fight off infection and fight off cancer, as well as regulate the endocrine system. So very, very important.
I have tracked my sleep almost every night now for about 3 years, and looking at REM and deep and light sleep. And one of the things I've noticed is when I'm getting deep sleep, I get more of it in the earlier parts of the night. Let's say around 11 p.m., midnight, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. I remember hearing a scientist, this was many years ago, I'm talking probably 17 years ago or longer, maybe 20 years ago. And he said something, he said, every hour you sleep before something like 1 or 2 a.m., that counts for a lot more sleep than the time you're sleeping after 1 a.m. or so. And I thought, well, I wonder why he's saying that and why that is. But I think the bigger reason is more people tend to get more deep sleep in the earlier parts of the night, and more people REM in the later part of the night. Is that something that you've experienced yourself, or does that make sense to you?
That is absolutely true, and it's been extremely well documented over many decades. There's absolutely no doubt that is the case. You get most of your deep sleep in the first half of the night, and most of your dream sleep in the back half of your night. And you mentioned circadian rhythms. Well, and that's a daily event. So that's 24 hours and 15 minutes is our circadian rhythm. But we also have what's called sleep cycles, which on average are 90 minutes. And so when you look at your sleep period over the night, you might have 5 good sleep cycles, right? Well, in the first couple sleep cycles, that's where you have most of your deep sleep. And by the time you get into your third, you may have a little deep sleep. By the time you have fourth and fifth sleep cycle, no deep sleep. But at the same time, the exact opposite happens with dream sleep. Very little in the first 2, and then it grows and you have a lot in the last.
Yeah, this is why the early bird gets the worm, right? This is why getting sleep early. You know what? I'm really blessed to have a 4-year-old right now and a 10-month-old, and that requires us to get in bed at by 8 p.m. And go and start typically sleeping around then. So, anyways, I've outside of when we sleep with our kids, which is actually very, very often, it's that affects my sleep some, but. The fact I'm getting to bed earlier is actually helping that. So
yes,
that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. I am one of the things I remember reading a study years ago about how much sleep the average person got. It was around back in 1910. Okay. So early 1900s versus how much sleep people get today. It's far less. Now, outside of just modern technology, okay, the fact that we can turn on a light, why do you think over the past 50, 60, 70 years, sleep has continued to decline in terms of the quality and in terms of, conditions like insomnia, which cause a number of other issues? But why do you think sleep has continued to decline?
This is why I became so interested in stress, because our lifestyles have changed so much over the past 100 plus years, where the world operates at a much faster pace, and there's much more activity. There's much less time, as you said, in nature, and the whole pace of life causes so much more irrelevant activities. And again, back to what you were saying earlier, no time to meditate. Very few people bother with prayers in a substantial manner. And so there's this loss of connectedness as opposed to sitting playing video games and doing the like.
Yeah, there's no doubt the secondary thing I've noticed affects my sleep the most outside of my time indoor versus outdoor is watching TV or being on a phone or being on a computer. And for me, it tends to be more the computer. I'm doing work, I'm writing a book, I'm doing something that might be productive and good, but it absolutely affects my sleep. Absolutely. And so I think to your point, but there's also this tendency in society today, and I like personal growth and self-development, but I think sometimes the mindset is all about how can I get myself ahead, and it's this sort of we have sort of correlated our identity and our own self-worth related to how much we can do, how productive we can be. And part of being overly productive and attaching your self-worth to that. Now, there's other problems related to the whole psychology and spirituality of it, but I also think that sort of tendency is keeping our body in a fight or flight mode. It's like survival. I mean, when you're trying to be more and more and more productive in a way. And so I think that's really, really harmed our sleep as well. Just the general way we think about what success is. And there's a number of things around that. You know, another question I had. So obviously some people are having a hard time falling asleep, possibly because of it. Their mind is racing. That's a really common thing for a lot of people. What are some of the other big reasons why people can't fall asleep, or maybe somebody can't stay asleep?
Yeah, they're two different problems. Actually, you have sleep onset insomnia and you have sleep maintenance insomnia. So they're typically somewhat different. The relationship between the two, again, gets back to stress. But in terms of sleep onset, there's another factor that's significant, and that's this variability in terms of when you go to bed. You know, you realize it's good to go to bed early and consistently at about the same time. So your body gets used to that circadian rhythm, although let me give you this caveat. There are some people that just are wired to go to bed at a later time. And so it gets back to the consistency. What works for you, but then do it regularly. All right. So that plays a role in terms of sleep onset. The other big role is stress. If you go to bed with a lot on your mind, you're not going to go to sleep well. Yeah.
I find that's the number one reason I can't fall asleep is my mind is racing. I'm thinking about things. There's something just happened during the day. I'm overthinking. And I found for myself, journaling is very helpful with that. Yeah. Is one of the things that I've done is being able to write down, okay, can I fix this? Can I not? Spending some time, reading my Bible and journaling, I think is very, very helpful practice for that. The other thing is staying asleep, as you talked about, which a lot of people, again, the number of people that have insomnia is really shocking. Think about that, 1 in 3 people. Yeah. That is a lot of people with major sleep issues. I think a lot of people have insomnia and they don't necessarily maybe realize it. Maybe they're getting 5 hours of sleep a night and they're kind of getting through life, but they don't realize how much it's harming their health. Like as I mentioned before, I've studied a lot about longevity, and there's no doubt that sleep ages you. Have you read any research or done any, self-study in terms of what exactly the lack of sleep does to our cellular health and how it actually ages us?
Yeah, there's been a fair amount of research. It boils down to the lack of cell repair, and those kinds of things. Even the lack of DNA repair, because you've heard of telomeres, that basically deteriorate over time, and that sort of extinguishes life when you lose your telomeres. And on the other hand, good sleep and delta sleep, that's part of DNA repair. So a lot of it comes back to proper sleep and restoration of delta sleep, which is, what we're very proud of, because that's what we were really after. How do you reverse the process? Can the process be reversed? And that was what was so exciting for us when we saw that if you emit these frequencies in the range of the parasympathetic division, the rest and digest part of the autonomic nervous system, that changes the equation.
What percentage of time do you think people are generally, now I know it's a spectrum very similar to what we talked about with the deep versus light sleep, but generally what percentage of the time in day do you think people are spending in this fight or flight state versus how much they're spending in the rest or digest state?
This is really sad, but I would say that in our society, in this country right now, I would say 80 to 90% is spent more on the side of fight or flight. Okay. In other words, where along that spectrum between parasympathetic and sympathetic, sympathetic fight or flight, parasympathetic rest and digest, where do people feel most safe and secure? And that's where they're going to go. And so, for instance, if you were traumatized as a kid, these people will be hypervigilant and they'll be looking around, looking for danger. And so if all of a sudden you had a way to move them into the parasympathetic range, they would not stay there. Because they don't feel like they're on guard at that point. So you kind of have to meet them where they're at, which gets back to our resonant frequency.
Well, the human body is incredibly resilient, and we're meant to be able to deal with a pretty high level of stress. The thing is that we just are so stressed that it's too much for us to be able to handle. The number one condition I've seen, Dan, is I've been in clinical practice before and now doing some practice now. The fastest growing condition I've seen over the past 7 years has been mental health issues, depression, anxiety, identity issues. If we just continue to climb. And I think that, is very, very telling. I think, sleep is also very connected to some of that. And so these are major issues we've got to fix. As I mentioned earlier in studying Chinese medicine, one of the things that they talk about, I talked about circadian rhythms. That's sort of the top. When you throw off that, you start to throw off your cellular communication, then that affects other things down the chain. As you mentioned and alluded to with stem cell exhaustion, your body cannot repair and heal. So if you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, you know what, I have injuries and they used to get better. They don't get better anymore. I've got knee pain. I've got low back pain. I just don't feel good. Your stem cells are probably exhausted, and your body is only creating stem cells at a very high level during deep sleep. Also, cellular senescence. When you have these senescent cells throughout your body, they're secreting poisons. These are known as zombie cells. They are something that can happen more as we age, but it's sort of like you got trash in your body. You've got to get rid of. They're parts that are not working anymore. Well, this happens during deep sleep. And so as Dr. Cohen's talking about here, sleep is so crucial for healing, for cellular regeneration. If you want to reverse a condition, if you want to reverse hypothyroidism, if you want to reverse autoimmune disease, if you want to reverse type 2 diabetes, deep sleep is where it happens. And I do want to mention, I'm a big fan of nutrition, but turmeric does not heal you. Broccoli does not heal you. Okay? Vitamin C doesn't heal you. The body heals itself, but your body heals itself to the highest degree during deep sleep. And so if you're going to pay attention to one of the factors for your health, in fact, I would throw in the top 5, might even be number 1, but it's in the top 5. If you're going to say, I'm going to track my health, your cholesterol levels are actually not that important. Okay. There are plenty of other things bigger. Even your estrogen or testosterone levels are not as important as tracking your deep sleep. It's going to be at the very, very top of the list because it's going to affect all of these other things. And so, Dr. Dan, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your technology you've created around how you've created this amazing tech that I'm now using called Soltec. And it is giving off these magnetic frequencies and vibration. And we've seen this, by the way, there's so many studies. If you want to look at the efficacy around how vibration and these low magnetic frequencies, infrared saunas give off frequencies. They're vibrational play. We know these things from the medical literature. It impacts our health in a really big way. But I'd love for you to talk about the technology of Soltec, how that impacts our sleep, and in particular, our deep sleep.
Yeah. Our system, our system has several components, but the star of the show is the magnetic generator. Although it's not the smartest part. Okay, but it is the one that produces these magnetic frequencies. Okay, and so what we have to do in terms of creating a technology that works for each individual is we have to be able to time providing you with the right frequencies at the right time. So we've had to develop our own wearable. So it's a wearable that you just wear at night, where it's looking at your sleep and analyzing it in real time. Okay, and we have what we call real-time sleep stage enhancement. And so it knows when you're moving into deep sleep. And then what it does is it immediately sends, a fraction of a second worth of a signal to the generator to tell it what frequencies to emit. And then the generator starts producing those frequencies to support and enhance moving into deep sleep. And then once you get into deep sleep, then it says, okay, we got them there. Now there's this other part of the brain. And here, I'll just show you real quickly. So the first frequencies literally affect this part of the brain. This is the brainstem. This is the big cerebral hemisphere. So we go from here to then affecting the thalamus, okay, this other part, which communicates with the cerebrum, all right? And this operates at a different frequency. So as you're in this deep sleep, now we move you to stimulate this area to deepen the deep sleep, all right? And that's really key. And we hold that for until you want to move out of deep sleep. And so we don't do anything to prevent you from moving out.
You know, Dan, there are a lot of people who have not been in true deep sleep for 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm thinking about, like, I'm thinking about my dad right now and some other people. He's in his 70s, but, you know, I think about a lot of people who are just chronically ill. They have not had true deep sleep for some years. And it's the number one thing that's keeping them from healing, because you know what a lot of people don't realize is that our organs are constantly regenerating. We have a new liver every year.
Yeah.
Our lungs, the beta cells of our pancreas, of course, our blood, that's every 4 months. But many of our organs outside of our brain, for the most part, and bones, but for the most part, many of our organs are almost completely new every year. But a lot of the tissues our bodies are creating are not fully healthy young tissue, versus if you're getting deep sleep, you're going to be able to do that. You're going to be able to better reverse disease. And I think it's an important thing for people to realize just how important deep sleep is. Right. What have you noticed as people have started to use your innovation, your technology? What are some of the things people have noticed in terms of how much more deep sleep they're getting on a regular basis? And what's your recommendation? How much deep sleep do you think people are typically getting? I know it's a spectrum, but if we could bucket it, how much deep sleep are they getting now versus how much more are they getting once they're, you know, using this, you know, this vibrational and magnetic technology?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the length of time. Okay. And it depends on the person's age and brain health. Okay, so typically, you know, we have a number of, or I should say a customer segment that are performance maximizers. Okay, and, you know, there wasn't such a thing 20, 30 years ago, right? And these folks are really interesting because they say, you know I'm going to lose deep sleep and I don't want to. So I'm going to get ahead of the curve and start using this kind of technology before I lose too much. And so those people. Well,
that's how I am. Yeah, I don't have insomnia. I don't have major sleep issues, but I'm using it anyways.
Yeah. Well, and that's what they're doing. But you know what? Guess what? You know, you start to lose deep sleep even in your mid-20s. So it's not surprising to see some of our customer base is that young for that purpose. All right. But then, you know, you talked about sleep fragmentation. And we have a lot of customers, and we look at all this data because we store all this on a database, so we can look at it in large quantities, you know, and track these changes. And what's interesting about those people is, yes, they've lost a lot of deep sleep. And what that's done is it's broken their night into all these little sections. So their sleep is really fragmented. But as they start to restore their deep sleep, then essentially they sleep in larger blocks. And we see this particularly in women, perimenopausal, menopausal. You know, they have this sleep fragmentation, and this can help them. Men frequently notice this when they have to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And they notice, typically after 3-4 hours, they might get up and they go, I'm not that tired anymore, so I'm not going to bother going back to sleep. But meanwhile, they start using our system, and then after a month or 2 months, depending on how bad their brain, was when they started, they might start getting up and go to the bathroom because they still have to go to the bathroom. But they go, I feel that I'm tired and I can go back to sleep. And anyway, we know they've gotten up. So when they get back in bed anyway, we give what we call back to sleep frequencies, to accelerate that process of getting them back to sleep. So, all of this stuff is really pivotal when it comes to driving that deep sleep, which causes, like you said, all these problems in these types of folks.
Yeah, talk to me about the importance of, and really the difference, and you mentioned that sort of HPA axis, which is related to, or the hypothalamus in particular, that area of the brain that I know is so important. It's very connected to our adrenals, very connected to that fight or flight state in the parasympathetic nerve system. Talk to us about how these sort of, I mean, like what's happening when somebody is experiencing, magnetic frequencies or vibrational therapies? How is that impacting our body, and that allows people to get into these deeper states of sleep?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple ways to look at this, because there's more than one conduit for getting this signal into the body. Back in the 1960s, 1970s, this orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Becker, he wrote a book you may have read, The Body Electric.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And he defined what was called the DC perineural system. And so on the surface of the nerves is the myelin. And although the current, if you measure it naturally, is just DC, all right, so there's no frequency to it, but that tissue will carry low frequency. So, we put the Z-Gen, the magnetic conditioner, under people's feet, even under the bed, under their feet. And that system, the DC perineural system, carries that up through the nervous system, because it's a type of cell in the nervous system called glial cells. And that's half the nervous system. Half is neurons, half are glial cells. So that communicates it up throughout the brain. And that's really important to, again, get those frequencies to the right place that they resonate with to enhance that functionality. And then there's what NIH calls the biofield, what you were referring to in Eastern medicine, in meridians and those kinds of different energetic structures. That interacts with magnetism too. So all of these are the same system. And again, using the language of the nervous system and stimulating the parasympathetic division, it affects, surprisingly, both deep sleep and stress reduction. The parasympathetic division is responsible for both.
Yeah, it's so important. Most people are living in a sympathetic state. When you can get into that parasympathetic state more regularly, that's going to allow you to get more of that deep sleep that we're talking about. And just as an example, I want people to think about this. If you, and recently I was listening to some music, and I don't listen to music that often. In fact, when I was listening to it, I realized I need to listen to music more. I'm too busy. But all that being said, I realized that I was sitting here listening to a song, and I'm like, it just put me in a state of I was just relaxed. Like I wasn't thinking about this and that and that. We were on a road trip. I was driving from Atlanta back to Nashville, and me and a friend were riding, and we were listening to some of our favorite songs from, of course, I grew up in the 90s. And so we were listening to some great 90s music, but I was really enjoying it. And it made me think of what you're saying here, though. Music is frequency. It's a sound. It's frequency. And it really impacts us. It impacts us emotionally. It can put you in a state of euphoric joy. It can put you in a state of feeling down, or sort of, this sort of more melancholy state. And so it can energize you. We see music do this. And so, but it's working through frequency. So think about, in the very same way, how we can use magnetic frequencies and vibrational frequencies, and how those can then impact our cells and our tissues, either amplifying them, tonifying them, or calming them down, and allowing us to get in these deeper states of sleep. And so again, years ago, it's so funny when people would talk about frequencies, I think people thought that sounded weird. But what's crazy is Chinese medicine is founded on this. A lot of our natural forms of medicine are because they understood how the sounds and vibrations of nature and all of these different things impact us. And today, of course, Western science is finally caught up. I mean, it's crazy to think how a lot of what these ancient practitioners have done, which one thing I always point out, Dan, is that today, our modern medical system has probably been out the way it's done today, maybe 150 years, and really with the double-blind studies, some of what we're doing, maybe 50 years. So really not that long. But when you look at the ancient practitioners, everyone from Hippocrates to Maimonides, these practitioners what they were doing was proven by millions of individual case studies over thousands of years. And so they really understood these principles by which you have helped innovate and create a technology around. And so all that being said, everybody just remember these frequencies, they matter. They're important. And they can help you sleep better. And so this is really, really a key thing. If you want to extend your lifespan, if you want to regenerate new and healthy tissue and heal, if you want to have energy, if you want to look and feel younger, it's very important that you do everything you can to get more deep sleep. It's even more important than regular sleep and REM sleep, as we've talked about. I'd like for you to talk a little bit. Go ahead.
You touched on something that's very important, and I don't want to let it go. Okay. Yeah. You mentioned the word feeling. And let's think about feeling nature in a certain way. You said, yeah, you hear music and those frequencies and they put you in a better mood, etc. Okay. These kinds of frequencies, whatever type you're talking about, impact your feeling nature more than your head. Okay. So when you move out of your head into your body and into feeling, that's a dramatic game changer in terms of shifting you from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from fight or flight to rest and digest. And that is pivotal. And that was the most important thing we discovered in terms of where you have to target the frequency generator to go to help people move in that direction. That's the big shift.
Wow. One of the things I noticed is I'm using this device you've innovated, Soltec, is I'll put it at the foot of my bed, right on my feet, close to my feet in that way, and using it that way. And I think it's very similar to, grounding and earthing, this thing we're trying to do. One question I'd have for you is, there is a lot of, over the past 5 years, there's a lot more sleep tech coming out, or things that people are promoting as sleep tech. PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. That's a very popular form of vibration, which I do think it's efficacious and has some benefits. I don't think it has the same benefits of sleep as what you're doing, not even close, but I do think it's beneficial for circulation. So there's PEMF out there. There are different types of headbands. There are different sorts of other forms of vibrational products. How does Soltec and what you've created differ from some of these other sleep devices that are out there today?
Well, the biggest differentiation is we basically are working at the level that controls sleep. Okay, all of these other technologies tend to work at the cerebral hemisphere, which just manifests the results of sleep. It's almost like sleeping pills. When you take a sleeping pill, it's not affecting this area of the nervous system that regulates sleep. It's a sedative that basically is putting your cerebral cortex into a sedated state. It's not even producing normal sleep. And a lot of these other devices are doing the same thing. So they're not producing normal sleep. I mean, when we first discovered what we had, the first thing I did was run into I called a friend of mine who runs a sleep lab, and I said, Marty, I got to come see you because I want to see if this thing is working, doing what I think it's doing, because I can't believe it. And so he said, well, come on down. He says, we'll run some studies. And we ran 4 consecutive nap studies on people who had slept all night, because we shouldn't be able to get them to sleep again. And we definitely should not get them in the morning after a full night's sleep into deep sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And so we ran those things, and he had a full sleep lab. And so they were hooked up, they were wired up like a full sleep study, a video camera on them. And we sat outside the room, in the control room, watching these people and watching the polygraph and the EEG. So we were seeing all these signals. And we saw something and this is a person who had 50 years of sleep experience. And he goes, this thing I'm seeing here, these slow rolling eye movements, they should happen in tiny little bursts, just in drowsiness. And this signifies normal sleep induction. But with your technology, this is happening in these 5-6 second trains. It's even happening before they move into drowsiness, and then it's even happening as they move into light sleep. He goes, in 50 years of watching, these kinds of recordings, I've never seen this. We saw it in all 4 patients. He goes, you have a biomarker for inducing normal sleep. And then, by the way, all 4 people went to sleep, and 3 of them went into deep sleep. Which, right. And so he goes, well, okay. He says, I've never seen anything like this before. The other thing he noticed was, which was really interesting, because we were watching their video cameras. He goes, these people are not moving. It's like they're so dead asleep. There's just no movement there. He says this is really unusual, the depth of sleep that you're giving these people.
I think for a lot of people, because we're not spending time outside and we're not sleeping outside on stacks of hay or on, doing things that are bringing us these magnetic frequencies, I think there's a lot of people, it's almost like they're bankrupt, right? It's like they are so depleted in these beneficial frequencies that when they finally get them, their body is so hungry for it. And for a lot of people, they're so sleep deprived. When they finally are able to get this, they finally can sleep for the first time in years. And so I think it's so, so powerful. I do want to mention, listen, there are a lot of ways that you can benefit your sleep. Staying away from blue light. Okay. We know this in the evenings. You don't want to stay, you want to avoid that as much as possible. We know that doing things like journaling, reading your Bible, praying, reading a novel, just or listening to an audiobook that's more calming. These can help you sleep. Weighted blankets, keeping your room dark, keeping your room cold. But even when doing all of those things, for most people, they're still not getting deep enough sleep because, again, we're not living in tune with nature and spending almost every waking hour outside. I mean, there's a lot of people who not only are nobody's sleeping outside anymore. Okay. So we're not only doing that or on a completely natural surface, but also we're indoors all day. So we need to combat that with modern innovation. It's a very similar thing, I think, to supplements. I think there are so many people today that don't have their own garden or their own greenhouse or their own cows on their property. They're not getting raw milk immediately or getting eggs that were laid that day. And because of that, I personally take supplements, and I recommend supplements for people because we're just not getting what we used to due to I'm not even getting into the nutrient depletion that we've experienced over the past 100 plus years as well. But a very similar thing, most people are missing these frequencies when they can get them like this. It's really having a tremendously positive impact on their sleep. And so, Dr. Dan, I just want to applaud you on what you've done and being an incredible innovator and creating something that's very natural in terms of what it's mimicking and what it's able to do to help us get deeper levels of sleep through the power here of these low magnetic frequencies and the benefits. Any last things you want to share about sort of your innovation and what you've been able to create here that people should know about in terms of your company, Soltec? I wanted to bring you on because I wanted to expose people to this amazing piece of technology because it's helped me personally. It's helped a lot of others I know. You've had so many people who you've seen who it's helped their sleep. Talk to us a little bit about the device and how it works, and typically how long does it take for somebody to see some improvement in their sleep?
Yeah, that's a good question. What we found is for the stress reduction, and we recommend people use it for that a fair bit in the beginning for a couple reasons. One is they're awake enough to experience what the technology is doing. You mentioned stress before and how so many people are stressed. Most people don't even know what a baseline of no stress feels like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So it's really pivotal. But when we use it for stress, you can start to feel this subtle tingling. And as you use it more and more, I don't know if you've experienced this yet, but you'll start to feel that creep up your feet, into your legs, into your hands, ultimately throughout the whole body. When that starts to happen and you allow that and you get out of your head and you get into your body and you feel that, you can get to a point of zero stress. And that is remarkable because once a person knows what something feels like, it's easier for them to replicate it. So I love the fact that we can do that and people can learn that really fast. They can experience that. Some people, the first session, some people it'll take a week or two. It depends on how many sort of energetic blocks they have that they have to work through. But we've developed a way of sort of converging stress and sleep. We have a new release ready to come out in about a month where we call it Relax to Sleep. So they actually run a stress session and it automatically switches into their overnight sleep session. Okay.
Wow.
And that way they can feel it. They can get themselves in the mood. They can wind down, with the technology. And then before they know it, they've fallen asleep, and they don't have to sort of stop the stress session and start the sleep session. It happens all in one, press of one button. And that's remarkable because people can feel the difference. They can experience it. People rarely feel themselves falling asleep. They just end up waking up later.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Before we close here, I want to go over just a few more of these sleep statistics because I think it's so fascinating to look at just how much sleep impacts our body. So here's a few statistics here. As I mentioned, about 70 million Americans have a sleep disorder. I mean, that is a large group of people. Around 50% of older adults are sleep deprived. They're not getting enough sleep. 50%. Sleeping fewer than 6 hours a night is associated with a 4-fold increased risk of catching a cold compared to those getting 7 hours or more. The amount of people getting around 6 hours of sleep, think about that. You are 4xing your increase of getting a cold, flu, or infection and other chronic illnesses. Sleeping less than 6 hours a night decreases your natural killer cells, which is going to increase your risk of cancer. During deep sleep is the only time your body releases cytokines, these proteins that activate your immune system to kill infections. So you'll kill infections, Lyme, CMV, Epstein-Barr, a lot of these better mold, even these things when you're getting more deep sleep. Deep sleep declines with age, as I mentioned, over 60. 70% reduction in quality of sleep. We see it continue to get about 2% worse at least per year. And again, I could go on and on with these statistics. Lack of sleep is associated with a 20% increased risk of heart disease and all-cause mortality. Short sleep duration is linked with a 30% higher risk of developing obesity. And so, again, we're seeing here, and this with kids too. Actually, kids are getting a lot less sleep now, so it's affecting their athletic performance, causing ADHD, causing them to not perform as well at school. So this is something as well, I think, as we're looking at especially older kids in high school, junior high. It's important for them that we start paying attention to their sleep as well, because they're spending so much time on devices and less time outside as they did in the past. And so I just want to emphasize for everybody listening, listen, put together a sleep plan, right? Take a supplement like magnesium, start journaling, get your room dark and cold, but in addition, invest in some sleep technology to help you get better quality sleep at night. And I love Soltec here. Dr. Dan Cohen here is the founder of Soltec, and he's created an amazing piece of innovation that helps us do what the earth does, which is these low magnetic frequencies, which help us get more of that deep sleep, that most important sleep that's restorative, that's regenerative for our cells. It can help us heal and lengthen our life. Well, Dr. Dan, I want to say thanks so much for coming on the show today and for sharing your wisdom with us.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Well, hey, I want to let you know that Dr. Dan here was kind enough for the audience here only to give us a discount code. So if you are interested, and basically you can go to the show notes here. You can find it there at soltechhealth.com, and you can save $100 when you put in the code AXE. By the way, there's a 60-day risk-free trial. So at the worst, try it for 60 days and see how much it impacts your sleep. Again, I only bring things on the show here that I believe in, that I use myself personally. And so that's why I wanted to have Dr. Dan Cohen on here with us today. I want to say, hey, thanks everybody for tuning in here to the Dr. Josh Axe Show, where each and every week we're diving deep into how to improve your health physically, mentally, spiritually, and take your health and your life to the next level. Hey, make sure to subscribe and share. By the way, I thank all of you that are on mission with me. There are so many people out there that are suffering, that aren't healthy in many different areas of their life, and we can help be on mission to help them reach an optimal level of health as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.